Well, the court began yesterday, as we talked about, September 1st. This is the International Criminal Court of Justice. And originally it was to be set up in Western Europe only. But in fact, because of developments in America, it's meeting in two locations in the Midwest of America and in Western Europe. I don't want to say where. The notice that we just put up at murderbydecree.com under ITCCS updates gives us a summary. Let me just kind of touch on the main points of that. First of all, that there's four main defendants. There's Pope Leo, Robert Prevost, Charles Windsor, the King of England, US President Donald Trump, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Now, that's a recent development. Just last week, this is so relevant because in the news, of course, he's the guy who's trying to unite NATO to take on Russia, send more troops to the Ukraine. So this has tremendous geopolitical repercussions. Mark Rutte was identified on two occasions as being at Ninth Circle ceremonies. Now, we knew before that he had done things like cover up the Marc Dutroux case, where there was Belgian and Dutch royals seen at these child sacrificial ceremonies and other things. But survivors and one of our insiders came forward and confirmed with even more evidence that, yes, he was involved in these rituals, and he's a former president of the Netherlands, and one of his assistants was as well. So he's going to be named as kind of a secondary defendant. So again, this is like showing how it's not just a cult within the Catholic Church. It takes in a much broader range of people, as we talked about, political leaders and others. And so there's, besides those four, there's 9 others who are going to be so 13 defendants in all. And there's 5 presiding magistrates. 2 of them are in America, 3 are in Europe. And we also had to set up the court that way for security reasons. The reasons they're meeting in the Midwest as well is because that's Robert Prevost's home ground in Illinois and Ohio. And get this, there's evidence now, strong evidence, that there's a whole child sacrificial cult operating right within Ohio, next door to Chicago, where he's from. We mentioned last time that Robert Prevost was associated with several people who have already been indicted for child trafficking. A priest called William Auth, who has for many years been bringing children up from Guatemala, trafficking them through the Catholic Church. Now there's evidence that quite astounding that, in fact, researchers in Ohio have found evidence of mass graves connected in the Ninth Circle. This is in not only Cleveland, which is in the southern, Cincinnati in the southern part of Ohio, but in the north, Cleveland, which is right on, if you get a map out, Cleveland is right on Lake Erie, right across from southern Ontario. And in the course of our work over the number of years, we found evidence of graves along the southern shore of Ontario, right across the lake from Cleveland. All of these pieces of the puzzle are coming together now, and they're leading, again, back to Prevost, which is where he got his, if you remember from our last interview, he was ordained in Rome in 1978, took part in the Ninth Circle ceremony. And, you know, so again, this is the link back to the Midwestern part of America. That's, you know, another piece of evidence that now the special prosecutor has been spending today and yesterday laying this all out to the magistrates. They are then going to approve who are the defendants, and then summonses are going to be issued to these people. Now, the really unique thing about this trial, it isn't just like, you know, in a typical trial, you need, with due process, there's an assumption of innocence before guilt, and the prosecution has to prove the guilt. In fact, the basis of the court is standing on the Nuremberg precedents. And at Nuremberg, they were trying what's called a group crime. So in other words, it wasn't just a bunch of sick individuals running around killing people. It was a whole system of state-level genocide aimed at particular groups. That's what we're dealing with. And so, in effect, this court has been convened as a special tribunal with the power to say, look, they're already members of convicted criminal organizations. They are guilty until proven innocent. So it's a reverse. When you're dealing with group crime, you have to assume, like every guard at Auschwitz, every typical Nazi official was implicated no matter what they did. You didn't have to prove the individual guilt. They were collectively guilty. And that's what we're dealing with here. A system even big, we're older and bigger than the Nazis. The Roman Catholic Church and the Ninth Circle cult is a group crime, transnational criminal organization. So these defendants are going to have to prove their innocence, because the assumption is they could be arrested now because they're part of this criminal association. That also gives the court as a tribunal the right to immediately order arrest warrants against these individuals. But more than that, seize their property and assets. The entire community are empowered to help enforce these things. And another really important thing is that, especially with the involvement of Mark Rutte, other governments have an interest in this court case. So we do have people from governments that we're not going to mention at this point that are going to be present at the European court as observers, because obviously they can make hay out of this if the head of NATO is implicated as involved in these grisly, sacrificial rituals with children. And the evidence is pretty firm. Eyewitnesses, documentation, even photographs of these things going on. And that's, it's all billowing out now this week, now that the court, the magistrates have received this evidence, and the summonses will be issued very soon, within a few days.
So, some of the characters you mentioned, they've also been tied in to this network with Epstein, and there's been so much news on that since we last spoke, Kevin. Yeah. We had the leak of the emails, the Ehud Barak emails, showing that Prince Andrew was in contact with Epstein long after he'd said he'd stayed in contact with him. We've got the Epstein story just burning the whole Trump house down right now. So many people have turned against him. Some huge YouTubers who were supporting him, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, etc. Because it just seems like utter theater. They're pretending to release us information, but it's all pantomime. And now, you've brought those names up this evening: Epstein, Trump, and a lot of pertinent questions have already come in from the viewers. And you mentioned Ohio earlier, didn't you?
Yes. You see, Illinois, Chicago, where Pope Leo is from, right next door to Ohio, it's been a hotbed of the satanic activity for a long time. And we had a group investigate the Cincinnati Diocese of the Catholic Church. And there was massive money laundering going on there. Normally, when you follow the money, there's other crimes associated, like human trafficking, drug trafficking, that. Sure enough, to give you an example, and I can't mention the details, but we have people in Southern Ontario who said there's an area along the coast there, near a place called Port Burwell, and you can look it up on the map. It's an isolated community, and it's closed in. You can't get in there. If you try driving up the road, you're suddenly accosted by uniformed official private security, but you can't get into the area. One of our sources went down there hiking because he's from the area. They found a refrigerator filled with human skeletons right on the beach. And he said he drove away. About an hour later, 8 Ontario Provincial Police vehicles with their lights going sped down to the beach and cleaned out the area. Then they locked off the area. Now, that's right across the lake from Cleveland, right? And body dumping, human trafficking, all of that. And it's got the Ninth Circle written all over it. So you can't underestimate the impact once we get this information out. It affects everyone and everything. And, no wonder Trump buried the Epstein file, because it leads directly to his door, as we talked about last time.
So Izzy wants to know whether Leslie Wexner has anything to do with the operations in Ohio. So Wexner, he's the one that the CIA, they relocated the airlines to Ohio, the airlines that were, sending weapons south and bringing the white powder back up. And he did that with Epstein, and that was the crossover in Ohio. So Wexner was quite prominent in Ohio. So are you aware of Wexner and his activities?
I'm not, I haven't been privy to that information. Quite possibly that could be in the evidence that the judges are examining. You see, that's why 2 of the 5 judges are Americans, and they specifically are located in the Midwest to gather this information. Because, when you find an opening and you open it a bit, it leads all over the place. And so that seems to be one of the weak links in the whole Ninth Circle thing, is right there in Ohio.
Katz is asking whether they're using military bases in these states to do these transportation and these evil deeds?
Invariably, because don't forget, for many years, the Ninth Circle, and this is kind of the broader point the court's trying to bring out, the Ninth Circle isn't an isolated satanic religious cult. It's integrated with the defense system, the government, big money, not just the churches. The churches are necessary as a front for all of these things, right? And because they have very mind-controlled populations who are able to help cover up these things and think it's the work of God, right? So, yeah, military has been at the center of this for decades. Don't forget, for 75 years, there's been mind control experiments going on right after World War II to electronically, manipulate and control human thinking and consciousness and all that stuff. Children are necessary guinea pigs in this because they have, there's something about the innocence of a child in their brain development where they're easier to experiment on and control and program. And, a lot of people have researched and written about this. But yeah, it all invariably leads back to military bases. We found that all over Canada. The Indian hospitals are always located on Canadian military bases.
And if they're transporting people or substances through military bases, then they're not getting checked, are they? As if they were going around on public transport. Do you remember during the Vietnam War, they were bringing substances inside corpses, weren't they? They were smuggling inside soldiers' corpses, bringing them back to America.
Yeah, there was in that movie with Denzel Washington about Frank Lucas, the Harlem drug lord, American something or other the movie is. But yeah, like it's been the practice consistently to use, because like with the church, they're the last place people are going to suspect, right? And they have the infrastructure and the power to do it.
Yeah, the American Gangster, I think it was called, and I think
Diddy's
dad died. He was in the mix with those guys, and he died, got killed. All right, so the next question is, regarding this legal action, then Donald wants to know whether the judges are being checked for their connections.
Yeah, I actually know all 5 of them. Two of them had been involved in the first case against Ratzinger. The other 3 have been thoroughly checked. One of the ways you can tell the credibility of people is if they've gone through the ringer themselves. Every one of them was either disbarred or thrown off the bench. One of our early advisors was a Spanish judge called Baltasar Garzon, who was tossed off the bench in Spain because he went after the Catholic Church about their trafficking of children, making them millions of dollars during the Franco dictatorship. And so, like me, you gotta find the people who've been booted out of the system. That's the first test to see, like they, are more credible. But for other reasons too, and a sign of that is the fact that they haven't bailed and that they haven't turned. And usually when somebody is sent in to disrupt, they do that very quickly. They'll do everything to divide and conquer before it gets off the ground. But this is off the ground now. So, I mean, it's in a way started a momentum that's hard to stop, right?
So Sugar wants to know whether the current Pope was just in knife circle rituals during his ascension, or whether that is an ongoing practice.
It varies. I mean, you have to get in, you have to be inducted. And once you're in, you can't just go away. You're part of it. It's like there's no former CIA people, right? They're controlled to some degree. And don't forget as well that they need the credibility of Rome to protect the Ninth Circle. So these guys, yes, we found with Ratzinger, he was routinely involved in these things. And the same with Prevost. And of course, he was doing it in South America as well. There was one of the secondary witnesses described how he would go off into the mountains of Peru on so-called church, kind of retreats. And they said a lot of the local native children would go up there and disappear and never come out again. He was being invited by Pablo Escobar over at Colombia to all his parties. And, it's like the guy is dirty. That's why you have to, how beneficent he looks, like Francis. He's always the nice guys with the smiling faces. Those are the ones you got to watch, right?
Mm-hmm. So Tracy is saying, Kevin, will this news ever hit the headlines for the world to know the horrendous truth?
I would think that the only way it would really hit it is if there was somebody within the system who had an interest in wanting it to come out. And in this case, for example, we made a concerted effort to aim at Al Jazeera and the Russian media, because there are no friends of NATO. And we know that if we can get into the Russian TV and everything, that'll be another wedge. And invariably that'll happen. We found in this similar previous cases. You see, the way the system contains this stuff, they don't deny it or suppress it that it looks too obvious. They wait. Hopefully people don't want to listen to it, and they hope it'll fade away. But if it doesn't, they put in their own false narrative. And, like they did in Canada, saying, yes, some children were harmed, but now we're apologizing, and here's money, and we're healing and reconciling. It puts everybody back to sleep. If it gets serious enough, something like that'll happen. And they might even force him out or bring in a new guy, blaming health reasons, the usual standard lies they do, right? But it doesn't change the effect this has. And the main thing is the power of this court now, unlike the previous one, they have the right to immediately detain these people. And they're assumed to be guilty, don't forget, because they're part of a criminal network. And so that makes it all the more important for people to take action on the ground. And one of the things the court is doing, issuing universal arrest warrants, deputizing police and military, including from some of these other countries who haven't committed yet, but they are interested in helping to shut these things down and gain political mileage from it, right? The court is training action groups, training people how to go in and seize Catholic Church properties peacefully. Under international law, they don't have the right to their assets and property. They're already a TNCO, a transnational criminal organization. So, all of that is, in other words, it's kind of an activist court. It isn't just, okay, here's another verdict, here's another piece of legal information. No, it's meant to stop this cult once and for all, if that's at all possible, right?
And isn't it the case that the news is completely controlled, the mainstream news, by just a handful of corporations? And even people like us, when we're exposing these things, it's an absolute minefield where they'll just wipe us out as well. So it's really hard to break something like this that's linked to the network, to expect that the network-controlled news is going to report on it.
No, they won't, but they don't matter. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of like, officially, Lee Harvey Oswald was the same lone gunman, right? Everyone knows that's impossible. But so the popular awareness is much further along than any of that. And it doesn't really matter ultimately. I remember doing a study when I was a minister. There's a thing called the Albion Institute. And they found that even with all the technology in that, over 90% of people came to church from word of mouth because they were invited by somebody. And that is true anywhere. It's the personal contact that changes things. So thousands of people after this show will be talking about this. It's why in May, when we did our first interview, my sales went from 50 books a month to 1,200. Just boom, everybody wanted to read about it, and multiply that many times. And of course it's going to change things, but we can't be fixated on the so-called system, because of course everyone knows now people are a lot more sophisticated now because of their experiences of this stuff. So I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that this is going to rock the Tower of Babel even more in a big way, right?
So you've got a lot of people asking about, your reference to Trump earlier. What is the role of the White House in all of this and Trump?
Well, I mean, the initial evidence came from two of the witnesses from Europe, who, as well, a young girl in her teens, and then as an older woman, were both present on two different occasions. When one of the occasions was when Trump was at Epstein's Manhattan apartment in the spring of 1999, where, according to the posting, again, if you go to that earlier posting on our website, the interim, and I mean, like, in a way, it's not even about him, because when you're operating at that level of wealth and power, everybody knows about it and is implicitly involved in this whole network. And I had experience of that, as a teenager in Vancouver, where friends of our family were members of the Vancouver Club, and they would routinely joke about the children brought in from the Indian reservations. And one of them said, yeah, we pass children around like a fine bottle of wine, and there's nothing anyone can do about it, because it has all the judges and politicians involved. Like, they're all. So, I mean, this is the norm. That's the thing to understand, which makes it all the more important to look beyond simply the case of individuals and what has bred this, and how can we stop this, right?
Yeah, so a lot of people, still support Trump, and some people in the chat are saying that Trump has said he's taking on the cabal, he's taking on the deep state, he's going to end the human transportation.
Of course.
Do you just think that that's designed by PR people to harness those disgruntled people's votes?
Absolutely. Any politician, any priest who's sophisticated says what people want to hear. And don't forget the whole thing. One of the reasons it's difficult to navigate the whole issue of child trafficking and all this stuff is because every political faction uses it as ammunition against somebody. If you want to destroy somebody's credibility, just say he sleeps with kids, right? It's one of the main ways to bring somebody down. So you got, and it's when people who are quoting Trump and the deep state advocates all the time and everything, they're always all the people are blamed as being involved with children. They all tend to be liberal, politically liberal. You never hear them mentioning their own people as doing this. It's always the Democrats or the liberals in Hollywood or anybody. They're always the enemy. So that has a partisan ring to it that clearly is ideological. We're cutting through all that. We're not taking political sides. Our common ground, and it has been from the very beginning for almost 30 years, we're politically independent. We go after anybody who's harming children. And that should be a common ground for people to come out of these false divisions that they create so that these crimes can go on. Right?
You're getting asked if Trump, why did they try to take Trump out 3 times if he's in the network?
You mean the
reference to the assassination attempts.
I mean, you've got to be a very good shot to just nick somebody's ear. It doesn't happen because of a kid who then conveniently dies. I mean, when people, what I don't understand, Sean, is people are very aware, but then when it comes to certain father figures or saviors who they hang on to, it's like talking to a Catholic about the Pope. He's infallible. He can do no wrong. Anyone who criticizes him is part of the deep state. It's like this brainwashed thinking, cult thinking, really, because any cult involves a leader figure, a Hitler, a Stalin, a Trump, whoever, who cannot be criticized, or a pope who's beyond criticism, and people like that are perfectly situated due to crime, because if you're wearing a white robe all the time or you're infallible, you can do anything and get away with it, as he has done, as a lot of these people have done. So we got to free our minds from dependency on these so-called rulers and start thinking and acting for ourselves. And that's the kind of golden lining in this whole process. It's helping people do that and reclaim their mind. That's why I wrote that book, Governing Ourselves. We got to govern our minds first before we can do this independently, right?
There's a lot of news stories about Trump being ill right now, and photos of him with swollen hands and ankles, etc. Do you think they're trying to do away with him?
No, I think he will. When the heat comes down too much, they'll use the health problems excuse for him to not be involved, because that's what you always do. You check out any of these people who've ever been implicated. They always resign for health reasons. I mean, that's just kind of a standard boilerplate you use to get the person off the hook so he doesn't implicate other people. And so, yeah, that could happen. I mean, the guy's almost 80, people die, right?
So you sent me a photo of a guy pulling a face. Let me get this one on the screen and see if we can get
Rutte.
What's the story on this guy then?
Mark. Okay, so this is the head of NATO. He's the guy who's rattling his saber at Russia right now. Mark Rutte was the president of the Netherlands for 10 years. Before that, he was a politician in Holland. But early on, when I first interviewed Toos Nijenhuis in around 2010, his name came up right away. Numerous other eyewitnesses who we have on file described him being in Ninth Circle ceremonies and covering up for Belgian and Dutch royals who were at these things. He was there was a man, Laurent Louis. He was a member of the European Parliament. He mentioned Mark Rutte and a guy called Elio Di Lupo, who was the premier of Holland. The two of them were both seen at these human hunting parties. There's a picture of, in the same thing I sent you, a Toos Nijenhuis in the field south of Brussels, pointed where the human hunting party happened, and where she saw children incinerated as part of these Ninth Circle ceremonies. Yeah, that's the south of Brussels. She said this forest was ringed by Belgian troops. Nobody could get in or out. She and her daughter Carmen were taken there because they were, they treat some members of the cult like mascots, and they bring them around, with them to be used later, in other ways, blackmail politicians and that. But anyway, she said it happened right there. She's pointing to where the incineration happened. But the children were chased through these woods. Mark Rutte was present. There's other descriptions of them then cutting off parts of the dead children's bodies and mounting it like penises of boys, of the ones they've killed, and mounting them on a plaque. And it's in their meeting house in one of these castles in Belgium. They have all these sex organs, displayed on the wall. I mean, it's like very sick. And again, he came up time and again. So, the very fact that he's so strategically placed right now, I don't think that's accidental either, because again, this is part of an international network, and the purpose, of course, is to destroy human innocence. And also, when you put somebody like this in that position, they have to prove the right stuff. They have to prove they can do these things, because then they can be controlled very effectively. And I don't know what that gesture represents. It's kind of strange, but that's part of what is being introduced now about Rutte and his role in this.
Have you heard of Annika Lucas? She was transported to elites from that side of the world, and she when she was 5 years old, I think, and she's got a lot to say. Anyway, she's coming over, and I'm going to be staying at my house, and we're going to do a live stream about some of that stuff. So next question is from Faye. Was Prevost subpoenaed?
Well, the subpoenas are coming out this week. Yesterday and today, and probably tomorrow, because there's so much of it. The special prosecutor is presenting all the evidence that he and I and some other people put together, based on all this voluminous evidence we had before and recent stuff that's come in. When the judges do that, they're going to decide who gets subpoenaed. There's probably 13 defendants, and the subpoenas will go out right immediately. Now, to be served, don't forget, ideally, the best is to hand it to the person directly. These people are so insulated that's quite unlikely. But all you have to do, and people should know this, you hold up on a broadcast like this, you hold up the summons, the subpoena, and you say, Mark Rutte, you are hereby summoned to appear on this date and place. So sometimes all you have to do is post it on a place they've been, like their workplace or a house, and take a picture of it. They've been served. So it's under common law, it's a pretty straightforward process. You have to publicly notify they have to appear. If they don't, they're not contesting what's being said about them, and an arrest warrant can be issued. A verdict of guilty can be instantly put into the court. Right.
So I know you got a few things to say about this guy as well. Let me get him on the screen. King Charles.
Yes, well, you're in the royals anywhere in Western Europe, and you're part of this. We've talked before about his role in issuing the kill order against William Coombs, who saw Queen Elizabeth and Philip take those children from the Kamloops death camp in British Columbia. But he was also involved in there's so much on this guy. I mean, his involvement with Rio Tinto diamond mines, the killing of 10 Cree Indians in 2022 to get control of those diamonds in central Saskatchewan. The royal family, British royal family, has increased its personal wealth 50 times after Elizabeth came in the 1950s because of their investments in uranium mining all over the world, right? And a lot of people stand in the way of that mining. So this guy routinely and his family are involved in killing Indigenous people all over the place to get the land. That's one piece of it. He was personally present as well at these Ninth Circle rituals. Toast Nianhaus saw him at Carnarvon Castle in Wales. And recently, the reason Andrew is mentioned as well, because he and Andrew were routinely present at these Epstein parties as well. They don't mention Charles, of course, but Andrew could be just the fish they're thrown to the crowd, right? Like the one they can sacrifice, like they did Diana or any of the others, but they got to protect the guy, the head of the CEO, right?
Yeah, we just did an hour on Diana before you came on, Kevin. If the viewers have missed that one, check it out. And we also had Andrew Loney on a couple of times in recent weeks. He's got this book out about Andrew. And like you said, they've increased their wealth so much, but the scams and the schemes that Prince Andrew and Fergie get up to, that Andrew Loney exposes, I mean, how much money do these people need to get? All this money, power, fame, but they cannot stop themselves from just conning people, hustling, trying to get one over, just trying to keep increasing this wealth at the expense of normal people. Is it just some kind of mental illness?
Well, it is, of course, but I mean, people in that position really believe they're gods, and they can do whatever they want to anyone, and in fact, they can under their law. But the point is, they're also very afraid, because there's elements of humanity still in them, and there's fear that their own people will betray them as well, right? So I mean, it's that level of absolute terror, and don't forget, I mean, remember in Winston Churchill's biography, he described how he was flogged at whatever school he went to, right? Harrow or Eton or whatever it was. And I mean, his dad was in the cabinet, and yet it's part of the brutalization of these ruling class types that at a very young age, they get so brutalized that they're dissociated from their own feelings.